Don't go on that date. Sophie froze with one heel halfway into her shoe. Slowly, she turned toward the voice coming from her apartment doorway. Ryan Carter stood there holding takeout coffee like he hadn't shattered her life 6 months ago. Like he still belonged here. Like he still had the right. Rain poured behind him in silver streaks, the hallway lights casting shadows across the sharp angles of his face. His dark hair was damp from the storm. His blue eyes locked onto hers with the same unbearable intensity that used to make her forget how to breathe. Now it mostly made her angry. Mostly. You have exactly 5 seconds, Sophie said quietly, to explain why you're in my apartment. Ryan held up a key. Her stomach dropped instantly. Right. She'd forgotten to ask for it back. The realization irritated her even more because some pathetic part of her had clearly never wanted him to return it. You changed the alarm code, he said calmly. You lost the privilege of knowing it. You're going on a blind date with a stranger. That's usually how blind dates work. Ryan shut the apartment door behind him. The click echoed too loudly. Sophie immediately straightened. Because there was something wrong with him tonight. Not angry. Not jealous. Worse. Focused. Ryan only got this quiet when something serious was happening. Unfortunately, Sophie knew him well enough to recognize the difference. I'm serious, he said. Cancel the date. She laughed once in disbelief. You don't get to do this anymore. Do what? Act like you still have a say in my life. Ryan's jaw tightened briefly. You think this is about control? I think you lost your mind somewhere around our breakup. The word breakup hung between them like smoke. Neither moved. Neither looked away. 6 months later, and Sophie still hated how easily silence formed between them. Not awkward silence. Dangerous silence. The kind filled with things neither person survived saying out loud. Ryan stepped closer. Where did you meet him? Mia set it up. What's his full name? Sophie crossed her arms immediately. Absolutely not. Sophie. No, she grabbed her purse from the counter. You dumped me, remember? You don't get boyfriend privileges after emotionally detonating a 4-year relationship. Something flickered behind his eyes. Pain. Gone almost instantly. But she saw it. She always saw it. Ryan exhaled slowly. I'm asking because something feels wrong. Oh my God. She laughed again, harsher this time. You really can't stand this, can you? Stand what? That I'm finally moving on. Ryan stared at her for a long moment. Then quietly, you think that's why I'm here? What else would it be? He didn't answer immediately, and that hesitation twisted unexpectedly inside her chest, because Ryan Carter had once been the easiest person in the world for her to read. Until the last few months of their relationship. That was when things changed. Subtle at first. Late nights at work. Distracted conversations. Tension in his shoulders he refused to explain. Then one night he came home, looked at her across their kitchen island, and calmly destroyed her entire future. We should end this. No fight. No cheating. No real explanation. Just gone. Like 4 years meant nothing. Sophie hardened instantly against the memory. You know what? She snapped. This is exactly why I need this date. Ryan's eyes narrowed slightly. To prove what? That my life didn't end because you walked out of it. The words landed harder than she intended. Because part of her wanted them to hurt him. A terrible part. A weak part. The part that still woke up at 2 a.m. remembering the sound of his voice in the dark. Ryan looked away briefly. Just briefly. Then his attention shifted back to her dress. Black silk. Fitted. The dress he'd once said should honestly be considered illegal. His throat moved once. Mistake. Huge mistake. Because Sophie noticed that too. Good. Let him suffer. You look nervous, he said quietly. I'm not nervous. You reorganized your bookshelf twice while getting ready. Her mouth opened, then closed. You noticed that. Ryan gave her a look. Of course he noticed. That was the problem with loving someone for 4 years. They learned every version of your silence. Sophie grabbed her coat angrily. You need to leave. Instead of moving, Ryan reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. Show me his picture. No. Sophie. You're being insane. Probably. The honesty caught her off guard. Ryan stepped closer again. Too close. Close enough for her to smell rain and cedar and the familiar cologne she once used to steal hoodies for. Bad idea. Very bad idea. Her pulse betrayed her instantly. Ryan noticed. Of course he noticed. His voice softened slightly. Please. That word almost broke her. Because Ryan never begged. Not for anything. Not even during the breakup. Especially not during the breakup. And suddenly Sophie hated this entire situation because some small horrible part of her still wanted to trust him. Still wanted to believe he came here because he cared. Still wanted answers he refused to give. She looked away first. Weak. Pathetic. Dangerous. You don't get to act protective now, she whispered. Ryan went still. Then quietly. I never stopped. The apartment suddenly felt too small. Too warm. Too full of memories. Sophie forced herself to laugh. Wow. That almost sounded romantic. It wasn't meant to. Then what was it meant to be? Ryan stared at her. For one terrifying second, she thought he might finally tell her the truth. Why he left. Why he destroyed them. Why he still looked at her like losing her hurt. But instead his phone buzzed sharply in his hand. Ryan glanced at the screen. And all the color drained from his face. Sophie's stomach tightened instantly. That expression. She remembered that expression. Ryan only looked like that once before. The night before he ended their relationship. Fear. Real fear. He looked up at her immediately. Cancel the date. The seriousness in his voice sent a chill down her spine. No. Sophie. You don't get to scare me into listening to you. Ryan crossed the room in 2 steps. Listen to me carefully. Something in his tone made her heart stutter. I checked him out. Her brows furrowed. You what? The guy you're meeting tonight. Anger flashed through her instantly. You investigated my date. Yes. You are unbelievable. He lied. Sophie stopped cold. Ryan held up his phone. The law firm he claims to work for, he said tightly. It doesn't exist anymore. The air vanished from the room. For a second, neither of them moved. Rain hammered against the windows. A siren wailed faintly outside. And Sophie suddenly became very aware of how fast her heart was beating. No, she said slowly. Mia checked him. Mia checked his dating profile. Ryan stepped closer. I checked him. Sophie swallowed. Something cold slid down her spine. Because Ryan wasn't joking anymore. And deep down, terrifyingly deep down, she trusted him. Ryan watched the realization hit her face. Then quietly, tell me his name. Silence. Sophie looked at the clock. 7:42 p.m. Her reservation started in 18 minutes. She should leave. She should tell Ryan to go to hell. She should stop letting him affect her. Instead, barely above a whisper, she said, "Caleb Weston." Ryan froze. Completely froze. And Sophie knew instantly. Something was very wrong. Ryan slowly lowered his phone. "Stay here." Her pulse spiked. Why? But Ryan was already moving toward the door. "Ryan." He stopped. For 1 second, he looked back at her with an expression she hadn't seen since they were together. Raw panic. Then he said the words that changed everything. "Sophie, if he contacts you before I come back, don't answer." Instead of answering, he walked toward the windows and glanced down at the street below. Scanning. Watching. The sight unnerved her. "You're scaring me." That finally made him turn around. And for one brief second, Sophie saw something she never expected from Ryan Carter. Guilt. You should be scared. The honesty hit harder than shouting would have. Sophie crossed her arms tightly. "Then explain." Ryan dragged a hand through his damp hair. "This guy," he said carefully, "isn't random." "How do you know that?" "Because nobody with a fake employment history accidentally finds you." Sophie frowned. "You think he targeted me?" "I know he did." "How?" Ryan hesitated. Huge mistake. Because Sophie immediately noticed. "You know something." "No." "You do." Her voice sharpened. "Every time you lie, your left eyebrow twitches." Ryan blinked once. "I hate that you know that." "Ryan." He exhaled heavily. Then finally, "I've seen his face before." A chill crawled across Sophie's skin. "Where?" Ryan's silence stretched too long. And suddenly Sophie's frustration exploded. "No. Absolutely not. You don't get to do this again." His brows furrowed. "Do what?" "Half-truths. Weird disappearances. Acting like I'm too fragile to handle reality." "That's not what this is." "That's exactly what this is." Emotion cracked sharply through her voice. 6 months of anger finally pushing upward. "You vanished emotionally for months before the breakup," she continued. "Every conversation felt like talking to someone standing behind a locked door." Ryan looked away. "You stopped sleeping." Silence. "You stopped touching me." His jaw tightened. "And then one night you came home and ended everything like our relationship was a dentist appointment you needed to cancel." "Sophie." No, her eyes burned now. "You don't get to walk back in here acting protective while refusing to tell me the truth." Ryan stared at her quietly. And that expression. God. That expression almost destroyed her. Because he looked heartbroken. Like hearing her pain physically hurt him. Which made no sense. He was the one who left. "You think I wanted that?" he asked softly. "Didn't seem like you hated it." "That's not fair." "Neither was what you did to me." Silence swallowed the apartment. Rain tapped steadily against the windows while both of them stood there surrounded by memories neither knew how to survive. Ryan finally looked down at the phone again. Then his face hardened instantly. "What?" He turned the screen toward her. Another message. "Running a little late. Hope your ex isn't giving you trouble." Sophie's stomach dropped. "He knows you're here." Ryan's expression became dangerously unreadable. "That means he's watching the building." Fear slid icy fingers down her spine. "No." Ryan moved toward the window again immediately. Sophie followed him. Below, headlights glowed through the rain-soaked streets. People hurried beneath umbrellas. Traffic crawled through the city. Normal. Everything looked painfully normal. "How would he know?" she whispered. Ryan didn't answer immediately. Then, because he wants us to know he's there. That sentence hit differently. Intentional. Controlled. Like this wasn't flirting anymore. It was strategy. Sophie wrapped her arms around herself. What does he want from me? Ryan's eyes darkened slightly. That's what I'm trying to figure out. The words settled heavily between them. Trying. Not solved. Not handled. Trying. Which meant Ryan didn't fully understand this situation either. And somehow that scared her even more. Her phone buzzed again. Both of them looked down instantly. New message. Table 12. Don't keep me waiting. Attached beneath it. A photo. Sophie stared. Then froze completely. The image showed her apartment building. Taken from outside. Just minutes ago. Her knees nearly gave out. Ryan caught her arm immediately. Warm fingers. Steady grip. Familiar. You're okay, he said quietly. No, she wasn't. Because suddenly this wasn't a weird blind date anymore. Someone was watching her. And Ryan had known something was wrong before she did. Sophie looked up at him slowly. What aren't you telling me? Ryan's expression tightened again. There's something I need to confirm first. Anger flashed instantly through her fear. Oh my God, enough with the cryptic answers. I'm trying to protect you. You don't get to decide that alone. The words echoed sharply. Ryan went still. Because they both knew this argument wasn't only about tonight anymore. It was about the breakup. The silence. The secrets. Everything. Sophie laughed bitterly. You know what the worst part is. Ryan watched her carefully. I still trust you. The confession slipped out before she could stop it. And judging by Ryan's expression, it hit him like a bullet. His throat moved once. Sophie. I hate that I do, she whispered. But I do. For one dangerous second, something almost happened between them. The air shifted. The distance disappeared. Ryan stepped closer slowly. Too close. Close enough for her to feel warmth radiating from him. Close enough to remember every version of his touch. His voice dropped lower. You shouldn't. Her breath caught. What? Trust me. Pain flickered across his face again. Raw. Unfiltered. Like he was carrying something too heavy alone. And before Sophie could respond, Ryan's phone rang sharply. He checked the screen. Immediate tension locked through his body. What? Ryan answered quietly. Talk. Silence. Sophie watched his expression change with every passing second. Focus. Anger. Then alarm. Real alarm. What do you mean he already checked in? Sophie's pulse spiked. Ryan turned toward her slowly. Every instinct in her body screamed at once. Something was wrong. Very wrong. Ryan ended the call. Ryan. His voice came out tight. The restaurant says your date arrived 40 minutes ago. Sophie frowned. So? Ryan looked directly into her eyes. He requested a table with full visibility of the entrance. Cold fear flooded her chest instantly. Then Ryan delivered the sentence that shattered what little calm she had left. And Sophie. He paused. Like he already hated what he was about to say. He specifically requested a table for 3. The ride to the restaurant felt like a countdown to something terrible. Rain streaked violently across Ryan's windshield, while downtown Chicago blurred into distorted gold and white lights outside the car. Neither of them spoke for the first several minutes. Sophie sat rigid in the passenger seat, gripping her phone too tightly. Table for 3. The words repeated endlessly in her head. Not 2. 3. Meaning Caleb expected Ryan to come, which was impossible. Unless. No. Her thoughts stopped abruptly. Unless Ryan had been right from the beginning. She glanced sideways at him. His hands tightened around the steering wheel, jaw locked hard enough to cut glass. The familiar calm she associated with him had disappeared completely now. This version of Ryan was colder, sharper, dangerously focused. It reminded her of the final months before their breakup. Late-night phone calls he wouldn't explain. Constant tension in his shoulders. That distant look in his eyes like part of him was somewhere else entirely. At the time she'd assumed he stopped loving her. Now she wasn't so sure. Ryan suddenly spoke. "When we get there, stay close to me." Sophie almost laughed. Still giving orders. "I'm serious." "So am I." Ryan exhaled slowly through his nose. "Sophie." "No," she turned toward him fully. "You don't get to act like some mysterious protector while treating me like I can't handle the truth." His grip tightened harder. "I'm handling it." "You're hiding it." Silence. Rain hammered harder overhead. Then quietly, Ryan said, "You think I left because I stopped loving you." The words hit her chest so hard it physically hurt. Sophie looked away instantly toward the window. Because yes, that was exactly what she thought. What else was she supposed to believe? "You don't end a 4-year relationship overnight unless something breaks," she whispered. Ryan's expression darkened painfully. Something did break. She turned back sharply. "What does that mean?" Ryan didn't answer immediately. The city lights flashed across his face in fractured pieces while tension thickened inside the car. Then finally, "The night before I ended things, someone followed you home." Sophie froze. "What?" "I noticed a black SUV outside your office." Ryan kept his eyes on the road. "At first I thought it was coincidence." Her pulse slowed uneasily. "But it kept happening," he continued quietly. "Outside the apartment. Outside your gym. Outside your favorite coffee shop." Cold spread slowly through her stomach. "You never told me." "I was trying to confirm it first." "Confirm what?" Ryan's jaw flexed once. "That you were being watched." The air vanished from the car. Sophie stared at him. "No. I hired someone to look into it." "You hired someone." They found connections between the SUV and an ongoing financial investigation. None of this sounded real. It sounded like the beginning of one of those crime documentaries Mia binged obsessively at 2 a.m. "What does that have to do with me?" Ryan finally looked at her, and the fear in his eyes nearly stopped her heart. "That's what terrified me." Sophie swallowed hard. "Ryan." "They were watching you," he said softly. "Not me." Her chest tightened painfully. "Why?" "I didn't know." The helplessness in his voice shook her more than the words themselves. Because Ryan hated not having answers. "And then one night," he continued, "I came home and found someone inside our apartment." Sophie's breath caught sharply. "What?" "You were asleep." Every muscle in her body locked instantly. Ryan's voice dropped lower. "I walked in and the kitchen drawers were open. Someone had been searching through our place." Fear crashed through her violently. "Why didn't you call the police?" "I did." "And?" "They found nothing." The rain suddenly sounded deafening. Sophie tried to process the images forming in her mind. Someone inside their home. Watching. Searching. While she slept. Ryan swallowed once. "The next morning I received a phone call." Something in his tone made her stomach drop instantly. What kind of phone call? Ryan hesitated. Then, a warning. The word landed like ice water. Sophie's voice came out barely audible. What did they say? Ryan's knuckles whitened against the steering wheel. They said if I wanted you alive, I needed to stay away from you. Everything inside Sophie stopped.
No breath. No shouts.
Nothing. Ryan finally pulled into a parking garage beneath the restaurant, but neither moved. Because suddenly the breakup she'd spent 6 months mourning looked completely different. You're lying, she whispered weakly. Ryan looked shattered by that. I wish I was. Sophie shook her head immediately.
No.
No, because if this was true, you would have told me. I couldn't. You should have trusted me. His voice cracked sharply for the first time. I was trying to keep you alive. The words echoed violently through the car. Silence followed instantly. Heavy. Broken. Sophie stared at him in shock. Ryan closed his eyes briefly like he regretted losing control. But Sophie couldn't even process the argument anymore because one horrifying realization kept repeating inside her head. He didn't stop loving me. The thought hurt worse somehow. Because if Ryan had fallen out of love, maybe eventually she could have healed from it. But this? This meant he'd destroyed both of them intentionally. And part of her hated him for that. You don't get to decide that for me, she whispered painfully. Ryan looked exhausted suddenly. I know. Tears burned unexpectedly behind her eyes. All this time, her voice shook. I thought I wasn't enough for you anymore. Something broke across Ryan's face. Completely broke. Sophie. You stopped touching me. Stop talking to me. I spent months trying to figure out what I did wrong. You did nothing wrong. Then why did you make me feel disposable? Ryan looked like she'd physically hit him. Because deep down, she had. The truth sat brutally between them now. Ryan had sacrificed their relationship to protect her. And somehow that didn't make the pain disappear. It made it messier. More tragic. More impossible to hate. Sophie looked down at her shaking hands. I would have stayed. Ryan's answer came instantly. That's exactly why I left. Tears finally slipped down her cheeks. Ryan noticed immediately. Instinctively. His hand moved toward her. Then stopped halfway. Like he no longer knew if he had the right to touch her. That hesitation hurt more than anything else. Sophie wiped angrily at her face. This is insane. Yes. And now this Caleb person somehow connects to all of it. Ryan's expression hardened again immediately. That's what scares me. Silence. Then Sophie frowned suddenly. Wait. Ryan looked at her. You said the threats happened 6 months ago. Yes. So why now? Ryan went still. Not physically. Emotionally. Like she'd touched the exact question keeping him awake at night. That, he said quietly, is what I haven't figured out yet. A chill crawled down her spine. Because Ryan looked genuinely afraid of the answer. Then Sophie's phone buzzed again. Both of them looked down instantly. New message from Caleb. You should ask Ryan why he really knows my name. Ryan's face darkened immediately. Sophie frowned. What does that mean? Ryan didn't answer. Huge mistake. Because now she noticed something else. Recognition. Not suspicion. Recognition. Her pulse jumped. Ryan. Silence. Ryan. He looked away first. And suddenly Sophie knew. Not everything. But enough. You've met him before. Ryan said nothing. Her heart began hammering painfully. How? Still silence. Then Sophie whispered the question that changed everything. What aren't you telling me? Ryan looked trapped. Actually trapped. Like every possible answer would destroy something. Then finally, quietly, 3 months ago, Caleb Weston tried to buy information about you. The world tilted sideways. What? Ryan's eyes locked onto hers. He knew your name. Fear flooded her instantly. He knew where you lived. Her breathing quickened. He knew about your father. Sophie froze completely. My father. Ryan nodded once, and suddenly every instinct in her body screamed at once. Because her father had been dead for 11 years. Ryan spoke carefully now. Whatever this is, he said quietly, it started long before your blind date. For 11 years, Sophie Bennett had avoided talking about her father. Not because she didn't miss him. Because she did. In quiet ways. Dangerous ways. Like still reaching for her phone whenever something good happened before remembering he wasn't there to call anymore. Like keeping his old voicemail saved even after changing 3 different phones. Like pretending she didn't remember the exact sound of his laugh. But grief was easier when buried. Contained. Controlled. Tonight, Ryan had ripped the lid off all of it. The parking garage suddenly felt too cold. Too small. Too real. Sophie stared at him across the darkness of the car while her pulse hammered painfully in her ears. My father has been dead since I was 15. Ryan nodded once slowly. I know. Then why would some stranger ask about him? Ryan looked away briefly. Huge mistake. Because now she knew for certain. He still wasn't telling her everything. Anger surged instantly through her fear. No, Sophie unbuckled her seatbelt sharply. No more half-truths. Sophie, you don't get to do this again. She shoved the passenger door open and stepped into the freezing garage air before he could stop her. Rainwater dripped from exposed pipes overhead while distant traffic echoed faintly beyond the concrete walls. The entire structure smelled like oil, cold metal, and stormwater. Ryan caught up with her immediately. Sophie. She spun around. What else are you hiding? His expression tightened. I'm trying to explain this carefully. I don't want careful. Her voice cracked loudly through the empty garage. I want the truth. The words echoed between the concrete pillars. Ryan stopped moving. For 1 second neither spoke. Then quietly, carefully, he asked, do you remember the last thing your father said to you? The question hit so unexpectedly that Sophie's anger faltered instantly. What? Before the accident. Her stomach twisted painfully. Because yes. She remembered. God, she remembered. The memory lived permanently inside her like broken glass. Her father kneeling beside her before leaving for work. Smiling. Tugging gently on her braid. Lock the doors while I'm gone, Bug. The nickname alone almost hurt too much to think about. Sophie crossed her arms tightly. What does that have to do with anything? Ryan hesitated. Then, your father wasn't supposed to die that night. The world seemed to stop breathing. Sophie stared at him. What? Ryan stepped closer slowly. The accident report was altered. Every nerve in her body went rigid. No. I didn't know until a few months ago. No, she repeated harder this time. That's impossible. Ryan pulled something carefully from inside his coat pocket. A photograph, folded from being handled too many times. He held it out silently. Sophie took it with trembling fingers. And froze. The image showed her father. Older than she remembered somehow. standing beside two unfamiliar men outside what looked like an office building. One man's face had been circled in red ink. Sophie's heartbeat stopped, because she recognized him instantly. Caleb. Or at least, a younger version of him. The photograph nearly slipped from her hands.
No.
Ryan's voice remained low. That picture was taken 13 years ago. That's impossible. I verified it twice. Sophie stared at the image in horror. Caleb looked younger, cleaner, less polished, but unmistakably the same man. Which made no sense. None. Because Caleb looked maybe 32 now. Not old enough to appear in a 13-year-old photo exactly the same. Fear crawled violently down her spine. Who is he? Ryan's jaw tightened. I don't think Caleb Weston is his real name. The garage suddenly felt ice cold. Sophie looked back at the photograph, at her father, at Caleb, then slowly toward Ryan. How long have you known this? 3 months. 3 months. 3 entire months. Rage exploded through her instantly. You knew someone connected to my dead father was looking for me and you said nothing. Ryan's voice sharpened immediately. I was trying to keep you away from it. You don't get to make decisions for me. You think I don't know that now. Something raw cracked through his composure. Real regret. Real exhaustion. Ryan dragged a hand through his hair violently. I thought if I ended things, they'd stop watching you. Sophie laughed bitterly. Well, clearly that worked beautifully. The words landed hard. Ryan absorbed them silently. And somehow his silence hurt worse than defending himself, because he looked like a man already punishing himself enough. Sophie looked down again at the photograph. Her hands shook hard now. What did my father do? Ryan hesitated. That hesitation terrified her more than the answer would. Finally, he worked for an investment firm before he died. I know that. He was investigating missing money. Sophie frowned. What kind of missing money? Ryan's eyes darkened. Millions. The air vanished from her lungs. He believed someone inside the company was laundering money through shell corporations. Sophie stared at him blankly. This couldn't be real. Her father had been normal, safe, predictable. He coached Little League on weekends, made pancakes every Sunday, fell asleep during action movies. Men like that didn't get involved in criminal conspiracies. Ryan seemed to read her thoughts instantly. He wasn't dirty, Sophie. Her eyes snapped toward him. He was trying to expose them. Emotion tightened Ryan's voice now, and I think it got him killed. The sentence shattered something inside her. For a moment she genuinely couldn't breathe. The parking garage blurred. Ryan stepped toward her instinctively. Sophie. My father. Her voice cracked violently. My father was murdered. We don't know for certain. But you think he was? Ryan didn't answer. He didn't need to. Tears burned down her cheeks instantly. Ryan moved closer again carefully this time, like approaching something fragile. Sophie. She hated herself for what happened next. Hated it. Because despite everything, the lies, the breakup, the secrets, the second his arms wrapped around her, she broke. Completely. A sob tore out of her chest before she could stop it. Ryan held her tightly against him while the storm raged outside the garage. And God, it still felt like home. That was the worst part. After everything, her body still remembered him. Trusted him. Sophie buried her face against his chest while years of buried grief cracked open all at once. My whole life, she whispered brokenly. I thought it was just an accident. Ryan closed his eyes briefly. I know. She gripped his coat harder. Why didn't you tell me? Because I needed proof first. You should have trusted me. Pain flickered across his face again. You're right. The immediate agreement startled her enough to pull back slightly. Ryan looked exhausted. Not physically. Emotionally. Like carrying the secret had been slowly destroying him. I handled this wrong, he admitted quietly. You think. A faint, almost smile appeared briefly. Gone just as fast. I thought if I could fix it before you found out. You thought you could save me. Ryan didn't deny it, because that had always been Ryan's fatal flaw. He loved like protection was the same thing as sacrifice. Sophie wiped angrily at her tears. So what now? Ryan's expression hardened again immediately. Now we leave. Her brows furrowed. What? This meeting was a mistake. You brought me here. And now I'm correcting it. Sophie crossed her arms. I'm not running away. This isn't a debate. Anger flashed instantly. There you are again. Ryan frowned slightly. What? Acting like you own every decision. Before he could answer, a voice echoed through the garage. You know. Both of them froze instantly. Slowly, Sophie turned. Caleb stood several rows away beneath the flickering garage lights, hands casually in his coat pockets, watching them, smiling, not warm, not friendly, predatory. Sophie's pulse crashed violently against her ribs. Ryan moved subtly in front of her immediately. Protective. Automatic. Caleb noticed. His smile widened slightly. That's actually kind of sweet, he said softly. The sound of his voice sent chills down Sophie's spine now, because the charming warmth from the dating profile was gone completely. This was someone else. Someone colder. Ryan's voice turned deadly calm. You shouldn't be here. Caleb tilted his head slightly. Funny, he replied. I was about to say the same thing. The garage suddenly felt like a trap. Sophie's fingers tightened around Ryan's sleeve. Caleb's eyes shifted toward her, and something terrifying flickered there. Recognition. Not attraction. Recognition. Like he'd been looking for her. For a long time. Then Caleb said the sentence that made Sophie's blood turn to ice. You look exactly like your father. You look exactly like your father. The words echoed through the parking garage like a gunshot. Sophie stopped breathing. Every instinct in her body screamed at once while Caleb stood beneath the flickering overhead lights watching her with unsettling calm. Not admiration. Not nostalgia. Recognition. Like he'd known her long before tonight. Ryan shifted slightly in front of her. Protective. Dangerously still. Don't talk to her, Ryan said coldly. Caleb's mouth curved faintly. That protective act might work better if you hadn't abandoned her for 6 months. Sophie felt Ryan tense instantly. The hit landed. Hard. Caleb noticed too. Interesting. That was the terrifying part. He looked interested in their pain. Like emotional wounds were useful information. Ryan's voice dropped lower. You've been following her. Caleb shrugged lightly. Following sounds aggressive. You photographed her apartment. I observed her apartment. Sophie's pulse hammered violently. Who are you? She whispered. For the first time, Caleb looked directly at her. Really looked at her. And suddenly Sophie understood why Ryan had panicked tonight. There was something profoundly wrong behind Caleb's eyes.
No worms. No nervousness. No humanity.
Just calculation. You've spent 11 years asking the wrong questions, Caleb said softly. Ryan stepped forward instantly. We are leaving. But Sophie grabbed his arm before he could move.
No.
Ryan looked back sharply. Sophie. No more secrets. Her voice shook slightly, but she held Caleb's gaze anyway. What did you mean about my father? Caleb stuttered her quietly, then smiled. Not pleasantly. Your father was smarter than most people in his position. Sophie's chest tightened painfully. He discovered financial transfers connected to offshore accounts, millions disappearing through fake companies. The exact same thing Ryan said, which somehow made it more real. He was going to expose everyone involved, Caleb continued calmly. Unfortunately, honorable men rarely survive greedy ones. Sophie's vision blurred slightly. You killed him. Caleb tilted his head.
No.
The answer came too fast, too smooth. But I knew the men who did. Ryan's entire body went rigid. You should stop talking. Caleb ignored him completely. Your father tried to protect something before he died, he said to Sophie. That's why you matter. Fear slid slowly through her stomach. What does that mean? Caleb smiled faintly. He hid evidence. Ryan cursed quietly under his breath. Sophie turned toward him immediately. You knew that. Ryan's silence answered for him. Anger flashed through her again. You knew. I suspected. Ryan. I didn't know where, he snapped. That's why I was trying to keep you away from this until I understood what they wanted. Caleb laughed softly, still trying to save her from reality. Admirable. Ryan stepped forward slowly now, dangerously calm. If you came near her because of that evidence. I came near her, Caleb interrupted, because she's the only person who might know where it is. Sophie stared at him blankly. I don't know anything. Not consciously, perhaps. The wording chilled her instantly. Caleb looked almost amused now. Your father was careful. He trusted almost no one near the end. A memory surfaced suddenly. Fast. Sharp. Her father kneeling beside her bed the week before he died, holding a tiny silver music box. Keep this safe for me, Bug. Sophie froze. The music box. Her pulse stumbled violently. No. No way. Caleb noticed the exact second recognition crossed her face, and smiled. Ryan saw it too. His expression darkened instantly. Sophie, he said carefully, what is it? But Caleb answered first. There it is. Fear crashed through her. The music box was still in her apartment, buried in the back of her closet inside an old memory box she hadn't opened in years. Ryan immediately understood. Does he know where you live? Caleb smiled wider. Ryan grabbed Sophie's wrist. We need to go. Now. Everything happened at once after that. Caleb moved. Ryan shoved Sophie backward. A deafening crack exploded through the garage. Gunshot. Sophie screamed. Concrete shattered beside Ryan's shoulder. For one horrifying second, her brain refused to process what happened. Then Ryan grabbed her hand hard. Run.
Pure cause erupted.
Ryan dragged her between parked cars while another shot echoed violently through the garage. Sophie's lungs burned instantly. Rainwater slicked beneath their shoes as they sprinted through concrete rows of vehicles. What is happening? She cried. Move. Ryan shoved her behind a black SUV just as footsteps echoed nearby. Close. Too close. Sophie's entire body shook uncontrollably. Gunshots.
Actual gunshots.
This wasn't a misunderstanding anymore. Ryan crouched beside her, breathing hard, eyes scanning the garage with terrifying focus. Then he grabbed her face gently. "Sophie, listen to me." Her breathing fractured. "You need to leave through the east stairwell."
No.
"You have to." "I'm not leaving you." Emotion flickered violently across his face. Wrong thing to say. Because for one dangerous second Ryan looked like hearing that nearly destroyed him. "Sophie."
No.
Tears spilled down her cheeks. "I already lost you once." The confession hit both of them hard. Ryan stared at her like the world stopped moving. Then quietly, "You never lost me." Pain exploded through her chest. Because she believed him. Even after everything. She believed him. Ryan touched her cheek briefly. Tiny gesture. Devastating impact. "I need you to trust me one more time." Her voice broke completely. "That's the problem," she whispered. "I always will." Ryan looked shattered by that. A sudden metallic crash echoed nearby. Both of them turned instantly. Footsteps approaching fast. Ryan's expression hardened immediately. "Go." Before Sophie could argue, Ryan stood and moved away from the SUV, drawing attention toward himself. "Ryan." He looked back once. Just once. And in that brief second Sophie saw it clearly. Not fear. Not regret. Love. Raw and undeniable. Then Ryan disappeared between the concrete pillars. Another gunshot echoed violently. Sophie's heart nearly stopped. "Ryan." No answer. Panic exploded through her instantly. Every instinct screamed to run after him. But footsteps sounded behind her. Different footsteps. Heavy. Approaching fast. Sophie stumbled backward, pulse hammering wildly. Then, suddenly, a hand grabbed her arm. She screamed. "Whoa, hey!" A security guard. Not Caleb. The older man looked terrified himself. "We need to get out of here." More shouting echoed somewhere deeper in the garage. Police sirens wailed faintly in the distance now. Sophie turned desperately toward where Ryan vanished. Nothing. No movement. No sign of him. Fear swallowed her whole. The guard pulled harder. "Miss, now." Sophie let herself be dragged toward the stairwell, but every step felt wrong. Because Ryan was still in there. And suddenly she understood the horrifying truth about the last 6 months. Ryan hadn't left because he stopped loving her. He left because he loved her enough to destroy himself protecting her. The realization hurt almost as much as the breakup itself. Rain exploded against Sophie the second they burst outside onto the street. Police cars screamed toward the garage entrance. People shouted everywhere. Chaos blurred together around her. Then, Sophie. She spun instantly. Ryan. Alive. Drenched in rain. Breathing hard. The sight of him shattered something inside her completely. Without thinking, Sophie ran straight into him. Ryan caught her instantly. Both arms wrapping around her so tightly she could barely breathe. And neither of them cared. "You idiot," she sobbed against his chest. "You absolute idiot." Ryan buried his face briefly against her hair. "You okay?" She laughed through tears. "That's your question." His hand shook slightly against her back. Tiny tremor. But enough for her to realize something terrifying. Ryan had been scared too. Not for himself. For her. Police officers rushed past them toward the garage. But Sophie barely noticed anymore. Because Ryan was here. Alive. Warm. Real. She pulled back just enough to look at him. Rain streamed down both their faces while city lights blurred around them. Then quietly, Painfully, she asked, "Did you ever stop loving me?" Ryan looked at her like the question itself wounded him.
No.
The answer came instantly. Certain. Absolute. Not once. Everything inside Sophie cracked open. Ryan stepped closer slowly, like he still couldn't believe she was standing here. "I ended things because I thought distance would keep you safe," he admitted quietly. "But every day after that felt like surviving without oxygen." Tears mixed with rain on Sophie's face. "You should have told me." "I know. You broke my heart." Ryan nodded painfully. "I know that too." Silence wrapped around them. Not empty silence. Full silence. Heavy with years of love neither of them managed to kill. Then Sophie whispered the truth she'd spent 6 months trying to outrun. "I never stopped loving you either." Ryan closed his eyes briefly, like hearing those words physically hurt. Or healed. Maybe both. Then slowly, carefully, he touched her face and kissed her. Not gently, not cautiously, like a man who almost lost something twice and couldn't survive a third time. The city disappeared. The rain disappeared. Everything disappeared except him. Ryan. Her impossible, infuriating, broken Ryan. The man who ruined them trying to save her. And somewhere beneath the storm and sirens and shattered secrets, Sophie realized their story had never actually ended. It had only been waiting for the truth.